Hey guys, tonight we're climbing Mount Olympus, but don't expect halos and perfect role models waiting at the summit. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I always enjoy seeing how far these late-night journeys travel around the world. Before we begin cataloguing the countless romantic disasters, questionable decisions, and spectacularly unhealthy relationships of the Greek gods, it helps to leave behind one very modern assumption, that the Olympians were supposed to be moral examples. They weren't. Not even slightly. Unlike many later religious traditions, the gods of ancient Greece were not portrayed as perfectly good or perfectly just. They were immortal, unimaginably powerful, and often breathtakingly selfish. They could create life, control storms, command the oceans, or send plagues, but emotional maturity was apparently not included among their divine gifts. To the ancient Greeks, the gods represented the forces of the universe itself. The sea could nourish fishermen one day and drown them the next. Love could bring joy or spark a war. The harvest could flourish or fail without warning. Their gods reflected that same unpredictability. They were beautiful, terrifying, generous, cruel, loyal, deceitful, compassionate, and vindictive, often within the same story. That makes reading Greek mythology a bit like attending the world's most dysfunctional family reunion. Everyone is related. Everyone has a grudge. Almost everyone has dated or attempted to date someone they probably shouldn't have. Modern readers are often surprised by the sheer number of stories involving deception, coercion, revenge, jealousy, and relationships that would today raise every imaginable ethical concern. But these tales were never written as instruction manuals for proper behaviour. Instead, they served as explanations for the world, cautionary tales about power, or simply dramatic stories designed to captivate audiences around a fire, in a theatre, or during religious festivals. It's also important to remember that these myths evolved over centuries. There was no single official version. Poets such as Homer, Hesiod, Pindar, and later playwrights constantly reshaped familiar stories, sometimes portraying a god as noble, other times as deeply unsettling. A character who behaves one way in one myth may act completely differently in another. Consistency was never the priority. Good storytelling was. Even the word perversion would have meant something very different to an ancient Greek audience. Many relationships that appear shocking today reflected social structures, symbolic meanings, or literary traditions of their own time, while others were deliberately written to emphasize the dangers of absolute power. The gods could ignore rules because, quite simply, they made the rules. That does not mean ancient audiences necessarily approved of everything the gods did. In fact, many myths quietly criticize divine behavior through the suffering of mortals. Heroes, queens, nymphs, shepherds, and kings often become collateral damage in the Olympians' endless rivalries and desires. So, as we wander through Olympus, it's worth remembering one thing. These are not stories about perfect beings living perfect lives. They are stories about immortal powers with very human flaws, only magnified to a cosmic scale, where every obsession could reshape kingdoms, create monsters, or change the course of history. If Mount Olympus had an official human resources department, Zeus would almost certainly have been summoned for an endless series of meetings. Unfortunately for everyone involved, he was both the chief executive and the supreme authority, making disciplinary action somewhat difficult. As king of the gods, Zeus ruled the sky, thunder, justice, and divine order. Yet for someone responsible for maintaining cosmic balance, he displayed remarkably little restraint when it came to romance, or more accurately, pursuit. Greek mythology contains so many stories of Zeus seeking lovers that ancient writers themselves occasionally joked about it. One of his defining characteristics was his willingness to change shape. Being the ruler of the universe apparently wasn't always persuasive enough. When he desired Europa, a Phoenician princess, Zeus transformed himself into a magnificent white bull. Gentle and unusually beautiful, the animal encouraged Europa to climb onto its back. The moment she did, the bull raced into the sea, carrying her all the way to Crete. There she became the mother of King Minos, whose descendants would later include the famous Minotaur. For Danae, Zeus chose an even stranger approach. Locked inside a bronze chamber by her father, who hoped to prevent a prophecy from coming true, Danae seemed unreachable. Zeus responded by becoming a shower of golden light that entered her prison through the roof. From that union came Perseus, destined to slay Medusa despite every attempt to stop his birth. Perhaps the most famous deception involved Alcmene, the future mother of Heracles. Zeus disguised himself as her husband, Amphitryon, returning home before the real warrior arrived. Ancient authors disagreed over the exact details, but the story illustrates a recurring pattern. Zeus frequently relied on disguise, illusion, or transformation rather than honest courtship. Other myths are far darker. Io, a priestess devoted to Hera, attracted Zeus's attention and soon found herself transformed into a white cow. Whether Zeus or Hera caused the transformation varies by source, but her suffering remained constant. Hera assigned the 100-eyed giant Argus to guard her, forcing Zeus to send Hermes to rescue her before Io wandered across much of the known world. Callisto's story ends even more tragically. A follower of Artemis sworn to chastity, she became pregnant after Zeus approached her, again, through deception in many versions. Hera's fury fell not upon Zeus, but upon Callisto, who was transformed into a bear before eventually becoming the constellation Ursa Major. These myths can be deeply uncomfortable to modern readers, and many scholars argue they were meant to illustrate what happens when absolute power exists without accountability. Zeus rarely faced consequences himself. Instead, it was mortals who endured exile, transformation, suffering, or death. Ironically, the king who enforced divine law often proved the least capable of following any limits when desire entered the picture. For the Greeks, this contradiction did not weaken Zeus's authority. It emphasized a central lesson of their mythology. Immense power did not guarantee perfect virtue, even among the rulers of heaven. If Zeus was the most prolific pursuer on Olympus, Hera was undoubtedly its most relentless investigator. As the queen of the gods and goddess of marriage, she spent much of Greek mythology confronting the impossible task of protecting an institution that her own husband repeatedly ignored. One might expect Hera's anger to fall primarily upon Zeus. Occasionally, it did. More often, however, the victims of Zeus's affairs, whether willing participants, deceived mortals, or entirely innocent bystanders, became the targets of her fury. It is one of the recurring tragedies of Greek mythology. The supreme god rarely suffered lasting consequences, while those with far less power paid the price. Perhaps no figure illustrates this better than Heracles. Before he was even born, Hera despised him simply because he was Zeus's son by the mortal Alcmene. She delayed his birth through divine intervention, allowing another child to be born first and inherit a kingdom that prophecy had promised to Heracles. Her hostility did not end there. While Heracles was still an infant, Hera sent 2 enormous serpents into his cradle, hoping to kill him in his sleep. Instead, The baby calmly